Hello and welcome to the Weekly Artifact. This is a tri-weekly podcast created by two friends who met in undergrad and, against all odds, decided to keep talking to each other. I'm your host, Justin, joined always by my co-host who, the first time I texted, implied he was going to drug and murder a woman.
No. So it's your fault we're still friends. You knew better.
I did try and distance at that point, but
something just kept drawing you back. I'm Alex. The internet moves fast. The hot takes of today are less than a distant memory tomorrow. We're here to slow down and recover the content that's been lost along the way in order to make sense of where the world was, where it is, and where it will be. To that end, we've chosen, Justin's chosen an artifact for the web to discuss.
Comments are our own and are not associated with any institution. The show may contain explicit language or themes, so see the show notes for specific content warnings.
Justin, what do you only have for us today?
So for season 3, or I don't know if it'll be the whole season, but we'll do some mini episodes for a little bit here. So it'll just be one artifact and one safe room, and my artifact for this week is a video from a channel called Innuendo Studios, made in 2015. It's called Why Are You So Angry? Part 4, An Autopsy on Gamergate. And so it is, obviously, as the title implies there, it is a part of a series of videos, but I think this one has the best moment in it, or at the very least, the best summary of Gamergate, and I wanted to build off of last episode.
Last tri-week's epiode.
Yes, the tri-week is its own unit of time, separate from any...
You might think it means 3 weeks, but it's actually something we've invented.
But continues, builds off of that one to talk about Gamergate. So I'll sort of summarize the video's summary of Gamergate, I guess. The precursor to Gamergate is this subreddit, r/politically incorrect, which is a group of anti-feminists and neo-Nazis that, among other things, created fake Twitter accounts to attempt to discredit Black feminism. And eventually they decided, and when I say they decided, there's like a paper trail of all of these decisions and things happening. Like if you watch the video, you'll see all the screenshots of people like literally saying like, okay, like let's do this now. Like it's not like a metaphorical they decide. It's like literally like you see the person who posted the decision to do it. Anyways, so eventually they decided that they were going to pretend to be upset about ethics in video games journalism as a way of carrying out their broader goal of just kind of attacking women and people of color. So Gamergate then begins with a post from game developer Zoe Quinn's ex-boyfriend detailing their breakup, and the video uses the term gators to describe people involved with Gamergate, so I'll use that term too here. And gators basically tried to work with this ex-boyfriend to, again, their words, destroy Kotaku, which is like a video game journal, and Zoe Quinn, who is kind of at the center of all this, and basically because they didn't like that Zoe Quinn was a feminist. And the question, like the central question of the video, is to what extent did Gamergate know it was an anti-feminist hate mob? And the creator argues that there's basically two groups within Gamergate. The smaller group being people who are just openly misogynist, racist, etc., and they were kind of like spearheading the movement. And then there is a larger group that he refers to the individuals in this group as Angry Jack, although I'll probably just refer to them as Group 2 mostly. And these were people that bought into their made up narrative about ethics in video games journalism, while attempting to say like they weren't necessarily like the people in Group 1 because they weren't literally Nazis. And the reason that they went after ethics in games journalism was because a couple of reasons. So one of the first reasons, because most reputable online forums and stuff have some sort of moderators, And if you just come on, spewing that you hate women and people of color, then you're probably going to get banned at some point. But if you say that you don't hate these people, you just happen to have issues with the video games that they make and the journalism that reports on the games, then it becomes more difficult for people to ban you. And also, I mean, video ethics in video games journalism is kind of trash, but it has nothing to do with feminism or whatever. That's just like a completely separate issue. But like, if you want to make a case for bad ethics in journalism, like you could easily do that. And the video points out that there's like documented cases of like unethical things happening. It just again has nothing to do with what the Gamergate people are claiming is happening. So these groups exist in sort of a mutualistic relationship. One group, the smaller group can sort of say like, we're with the, people who aren't Nazis, so how can we be Nazis? And the larger group, can say like, well, we're not Nazis like them, so they can always kind of deflect off each other. And well, most of these people in either group is going to be white men, although not exclusively. And basically, but primarily people in group 2. Obviously, I talked about group 1 once already. They just, hate women and people of color. But group 2 basically just doesn't want the industry to change. And at almost like a spiritual level, they don't want to have to like grapple with the fact that, if they like this old system that was racist and sexist, then that in some way means that they have some, uninterrogated racism and sexism. And so, like, rather than deal with that, they'd rather just like hear people saying that Zoe Quinn and what she stands for is bad, and actually you're the good person. And obviously, like any conservative movement, you're not actually going to be able to stop progress from happening, but you can sort of make life miserable for the people making the progress. And that's where, people like Anita Sarkeesian come back in. She's one of the primary targets of Gamergate. And, like I said, see our last episode for a little bit more on that. Ultimately, these efforts kind of made a lot of the people who were targeted more popular in some ways, but that, also helps with this victim persecution complex that a lot of Gamergate people have, claiming that these women are like too powerful and that they're like oppressing them somehow. But I think the best part of the video is when he makes this analogy about the theory of Gamergate being like a table, which actually I think it would have worked better if he said it was like a Jenga tower maybe or something like that, but whatever. But the big point is that, basically Gamergate is based on this idea that Zoe Quinn's ex-boyfriend claimed that Zoe Quinn exchanged sex with this person named Nathan Grayson for a positive video game review. And then built on top of that is, this idea that social justice warriors are clandestinely influencing video games journalism, that there's nepotism in journalism, and that there's this culture of fear that's like covering it all up. However, Nathan Grayson nor anyone else at Kotaku ever wrote a review of Zoe Quinn's game, and actually Grayson never wrote anything about Quinn's games ever, which I'll say a little bit more at later. But that sort of unravels the entire thing, and even the original testimony that there had been some sort of sex exchange for this was later retracted. So the whole thing collapses, or it should, except for, once you're in a conspiracy theory like that, evidence doesn't really matter. You could just kind of make stuff up like, oh, they were secretly dating before that. He didn't review the game, but it was mentioned in an article, so that counts as a review. Or there was a review, but it got deleted and scrubbed from the internet, and only we know about it or whatever. Yeah, so, and if you want to believe that Gamergate is true, then you're just going to accept whatever evidence that supports that. So, anyways, eventually Gamergate kind of dies down. Stephen Colbert had Anita Sarkeesian on a show, and they mocked it, and after that you can kind of see in graphs his popularity go down. He emphasizes, too, that although it's mostly associated with being sexist, it was also very racist, and saying that Group 2 is still out there and that they could be mobilized again, probably. So, yeah, so that's basically the video. You should watch it. I had to obviously leave a lot of stuff out just to give a quick summary of it here. But yeah, I mean, the first thing I'll just say, as I sort of alluded to, was the first time I watched this video, I was just completely blown away by that table part of the video, because I'll just say I was unfortunately had to follow Gamergate closer than I would have liked as it was happening, and I always just kind of assumed that like this review probably existed, but it was just being exaggerated and that they didn't really understand what was going on with it. And then when I heard that actually this review just didn't exist at
Right.
all, I was like, man, I really wish I had known that at the time. It's like I just pulled that out of my back pocket. Although I think he is right that like in some ways maybe it wouldn't matter because like
Oh,
evidence is
not a
not really going
chance.
to like affect these people. But so I'll just say this and then I'll let you go. Basically, the supposed articles in question. So the first one, that's the one that they all reference, where there was supposedly a review of Zoe Quinn's game. Nathan Grayson wrote an article about Valve's decision to start charging a fee or maybe increase the fee for submitting games to their platform. And Zoe Quinn was one of the people he interviewed about that, but there's no review of a game anywhere in there. There's another not even article that I saw someone point, because I went to Reddit and tried to like deep dive on this, but there's a second article which is not an article, it's just a list Nathan Grayson made of 50 indie games that came out. No information about the games, it's just like a hyperlink to 50 games, and her game is one of the 50 in the list. And then there's a third article that, again, the article is about, they tried to make this reality TV show based on there's like this, I guess, annual event called Game Jam that Zoe Quinn's part of, and the article is about the attempt to make that reality TV show. And again, there's no like review of any of her games in that one either. So that's those. I guess that is the basis of what became Gamergate. But all right, go ahead.
Fascinating. Well, just like the first thing you said was just like, yeah, I don't know. I guess it's like easy enough to just like have somebody that already like has fabricated or bought into the fabrications, like to say like, this is what happened. Isn't that like kind of fucked up for the sake of like journalistic integrity in video games? And you're like, yeah, I guess that sounds bad. And then but like either they like already like wanted that to happen, like they wanted this like to be the truth of the situation, and so they're just like super pissed. Or you'll be like, hey man, I don't think that happened. They'll just be like, fuck you, you don't get it. Like, it'll just be like, you're just part of it, man, you just bought in. Like, it's just like the conspiracy, like it's crazy that it's like not just like shitty takes, but like a literal like full-blown conspiracy is like the craziest part to me about this. Like, it's not even a thing. It was like wild. And then the thing that like really sort of struck me somewhat as the sort of conceit of the show is of like, okay, so this video came out in 2015. One of the people he references as like somebody that's kind of a victim of it in a way is I don't want to
Ian Miles Cheong.
I want to say Ian Michael Cheong, and it wasn't right.
That's in my notes here.
To say like Ian Miles Cheong has been like a victim of like the people of Gamergate because they'll like discredit and they'll dig up old racist tweets of his. To think that one would have to dig up a tweet kind of dates, and I don't know if he would be worth mentioning as like a victim of the scenarios half a decade later. I can't imagine, but the point stands. And I've also had a say from about how I think ad hominem arguments might have a place in here. So I don't know. I would not have included Ian Miles Cheong as being like, well, see, they'll just attack him for a different reason as to his credibility about whether or not Gamergate is legitimate. But I think it is worth considering, and it is like, it doesn't even fault the podcast per se. I think it's just that type of thing of what we're looking for, of like how immediately something can be an error of its time in the internet age of like even 3 years, 2 years later, like how you can be like, well, that somebody can really use that as like inappropriately, but still could use it as somewhat of a discrediting factor.
Yeah, it's just really interesting because the first time I heard of Ian Miles Cheong was when he was already revealed to be just an idiot. So I don't actually remember like him being portrayed as like a victim of Gamergate. It'll be interesting if like Gamergate happened today. I feel like he would just be a gator. Like,
Oh, well, that's the thing, right? Like, I don't know, like, if he just said some, like, what would have been considered previously off color, but, like, he was mostly, like, middling to fine, like, just sort of like a soft liberal that doesn't actually have, like, good opinions or something, versus, like, he's just like, all right, I'm, like, in the grift now, like, I'm just, like, right-wing sells better, like, outrage culture gets me, like, the clicks, like, you know what I mean? Like, I think he would just buy in, it's seemingly, with the
yeah.
personality.
The only way I can sort of make sense of it too is like I think he wanted to believe that if someone was a victim of Gamergate, that must mean they were doing something right, which seems like a fair assumption. But he kind of just like hand waves away. He's like, "Oh, they pulled up all these like racist things Ian Miles Chong said, but he claimed that he is not racist or whatever, so he must not be racist." So it's like, no, I think he was just racist.
Yeah, just because,
I
like,
think
yeah,
I think the Gamergate people accidentally found a real racist and like
right.
thought thought they were like discrediting like a progressive, but he actually was just racist and they just
Yeah,
pulled him off.
well, that's the thing, because like they're like, because other people they would just make baseless claims about him allegedly, but with him it's funny because I mean like this doesn't mean the whole video has to go out the window, but part of the video is like this like angry Jack is the like embodiment of like the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and like kind of like Ian Miles Chong is the enemy of Gamergate, so he's gonna get like a decent edit in my video, even though he is like a piece of shit.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I suspect that he's gotten worse since this video was made.
Of
I don't
course,
think this
sure.
person would make this video this way, but
No, I don't think so either, but it's still just funny.
yeah, I mean, he's a small part of the video.
It's just because he was the only name that I like knew anyways, and I was just like, huh.
Yeah, it's worth bringing up, but it's not. It's just a very small part of
Yeah.
the full video. The other, or there's a couple of things, but the other thing I wanted to talk about was the part where he talks about Angry Joe, who I actually used to watch, and I mean I think he's a fine dude. I just don't watch him anymore, but I thought his point that like on his forums on I guess his website or whatever, I just watched him on on that guy with the glasses, which is another maybe we'll want to do a deep dive on that too one day. But anyways, he would talk about how on his site he would have forums and everything that the Gators claim to care about had like a pre-existing forum.
Yeah.
But they would never go on those forums. They would only go on like explicitly Gamergate forums.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously they would eventually violate the moderation rules and be shut down because at the end of the day, that's all there is to it. But
Right.
I think that actually speaks to like a broader issue that I feel like we see a lot. Like for example, there people who like claim that they care about crime but only ever talk about when black people do crimes. Or
Mm-hmm.
people who like claim to care about immigration but only talk about immigrants from Mexico. Or like people who claim to care about fairness in sports but only talk about when trans people play sports. And it's like there's people who are like talking about all these issues in ways that are like productive. And
Right.
at some point it's like if the only time you bring them up is for your like pet project, then it's like at some point you have to be like, oh, maybe I don't actually care about this issue at all.
Right. It's never about embezzling or like theft of like workers like labor charges. It's never about expats from like various like socialist countries that used to like own plantations. It's never about like who does and doesn't get like caught for like steroid use or who gets tested. And it's like never about like shouldn't we use the money that's being sent to like fortify like you not using big slurps in New York City? Shouldn't we put that towards the homeless? Like, oh, so you want to help the homeless? Shut the fuck up. Like it's just like, no, I don't actually. Don't twist my words.
There's some spectrum between like that being like malicious and just lack of intellectual curiosity. And I don't know. I mean, obviously it's different for every person. but I don't know exactly. I mean, I think it's more on the malicious side more often than not. But I've also seen people who like just genuinely like haven't thought about the framing that they've kind of been given. I guess like the group. I don't know, even like the group 2 people I feel like are kind of like you could break into different groups. I feel like some people are just handed this frame and they're like, all right, whatever. And then some people are like, inclined to just kind of like fall into it. So anyway, so I don't know where that spectrum is, but so I don't know how to exactly address it, but I just thought that was interesting. And then the last thing I had to say was it was interesting the video was made in 2015, just before Trump's election. Right when Trump was elected, I kind of was like, oh, damn, like, did Gamergate lead directly to Trump? Although since then, I've been like, no, it's a Southern strategy. Like, let's not overcomplicate this. But I do know people who would make that argument, and I think there is something to this, just that kind of like same energy of like, it doesn't actually matter if anything in Gamergate is true, just like it doesn't matter if anything Trump says is true. Like those are like the same types of people for sure. It'll be interesting if this video is also just made like a year later. Well, yeah, I mean like I said, there's another part after this too, but I don't think it gets into connecting it directly to Trump's election. Yeah, it just would have been interesting if this came out like a year later.
Yeah, it's funny that like 2016 is like it's kind of like you said. I mean, like, is it Gamergate or is it Southern Strategy? Is like we know, but like, is it like was it the year before, or is it just like Trump was more or less inevitable in some capacity? Like, did it matter what happened in 2015, or was there never a safe room big enough to protect us? Justin, now that we are in our safe room, and the safest thing I can do is not say anything. So why don't you tell me what's on your mind today?
All right, so my safe room this week, or I guess our safe room this week.
Oh, that's nice.
Is
communist piece of shit.
Can't say that in the safe room.
True. It's all love.
Is that my safe room is that not everything needs to be culture wars, and I think specifically, I feel like I need to add like a call to action to this. So specifically, we need to normalize making fun of people for bad thinking.
True.
I feel like people sometimes we just like let people hide behind this, like, oh well, they're just like on the wrong side of the culture war or whatever. You'll sort of see what I mean, hopefully, as I go on. But so this is really like an evergreen topic. It is like
True.
actually the thing I'm about to talk about did not inspire this topic. It just happened to align with
Just more recent.
when we're recording this. But the news that M&M's is changing their characters, I guess. I don't honestly, I don't even really know like what exactly changed. I think like the red one is supposed to be nicer, and like the brown one frowns instead of smiles or something. Like
The orange one
I really couldn't.
acknowledges anxiety. So write that down.
Like I couldn't even really be bothered to follow this, and like this is clearly just like a ploy for free advertising from the Mars Corporation.
In the face
which,
of child slave labor accusations, one of those freak things.
Exactly, yeah. Allegedly, I don't know what we
Well, and also the brown M&M. So the green M&M is going from high heels to like all-star, like just sneakers, and the brown is going from stilettos to pump heels instead. So that's pretty fucked if you think about it. If you think about the implication.
After all these years, the M&Ms are changing their shoes. This has somehow like become like a culture war issue. Although I will say, I am proud mostly of what I'll broadly call the left. I don't think most people on the left have really. I think most people on the left saw through this. I think there's a little bit of confusion. I definitely saw people being like, why does M&M's think we care about this, kind of? But that was as far as I saw it go. I think most people were like, oh, okay, this is
Mhm.
just them putting themselves in the news. But not everyone thought that. I'm not even gonna mention names because I don't even want to give this person any more attention.
Cucker Dawson.
But certain Fox News host admitted that he found the old brown M&M to be someone, quote, sexy, who he'd, quote, like to get a drink with. And, this is a safe room. I don't want to kink shame or anything, although I think we could do a whole segment about how deranged and sick it is to want to sleep with a cartoon piece of candy.
All right, good thing you added piece of candy. That's all right, because you almost lost me.
But my real point here is that this person framed this change as an instance of the left winning. Not clear what gains the left is making from the green M&M changing her shoes, but this is apparently a win for us, so let's take our victory lap, I guess.
Thank you.
And so this is this is obviously an attempt to fit this M&M story into the culture war. I mean, it's almost explicitly an attempt to force it into this culture war narrative. And I feel like this happens a lot. I tried to just think of some possible examples, but I feel like if a school board changes its curriculum or something, it kind of tries to get framed as a culture war issue rather than is the new curriculum good or bad? This is not a cultural thing. We can look and ask if it's more or less accurate, or if it's more or less pedagogically effective. Even the pandemic itself has become a culture war issue, as if it's a cultural value to spread a deadly disease or not. And obviously there is some cultural stuff around how we think of health, but it's weird to abstractly put people into one of two camps based on how they perceive the pandemic. And also practically speaking, I've seen people from all over the spectrum go to super spreader events without a second thought. So my point, but this goes back to my call to action here though, which is rather than just allowing people to get away with oh well, they did this thing or they think this thing because they're on this side of the culture war, which I guess is kind of a euphemism for they have these cultural values. We need to just make fun of people for wanting to bone the brown M&M after a maskless night out.
Oh, that's God, what a winning line. Holy shit. That's so funny. Any opportunity to just dunk on somebody sort of, not even uncritically, but just sort of without needing some greater context, or you shouldn't have to find an excuse to have to pat yourself on the back to dunk on somebody when you could just have the material there. You know what I mean? Just if they're just can't help but open their dumb mouth and say something stupid, it's your God-given right to just absolutely annihilate them verbally. That on the other end of the spectrum somewhat, we took a victory lap for the left, but the sort of woke town sort of oppression Olympics or whatever, persecution Olympics that we also can see is somebody says some dumb shit, you don't have to validate one up, you can just be what the fuck are you talking about? You're fucking idiot. You don't have to engage with it critically or give them the benefit of the doubt. Even you can just be no, you're a moron. It's not even a bad faith. It's bad faith to engage with it as an equal position, honestly.
We can have disagreements within quote unquote the left or whatever, and I feel there's too often this attempt to say oh well, if you disagree with this thing, you're on this side of the culture war or whatever, when it's no, I mean, I don't know, some ideas are just better than others. It doesn't have to be in this camp or whatever, or even if you don't want to say better or whatever, some ideas we can just hold without being put into this group that's fighting a war against a different side. And there's also just not only two sides to an issue. It just seems that different ideas end up getting cover or become I mean, it connects back to what the story we were just kind of doing with like the enemy of my enemy or whatever. It's like if you are against the pumps on the brown M&M, then that says something about like your overall orientation towards my worldview. It's like, no, it doesn't. Like,
right. The other problem that like is like kind of the same on the same vein of just like if they can just like fall back and like, well, actually, like, yeah, like so you're just another like Fox News or something because you didn't agree with me. It's like, well, no, I'm actually have better politics than you for what you think you are, but like you just are like using this as like your like safety net of like, well, I can just like I don't have to like nobody can like challenge me critically because if they do, obviously they like are coming from the wrong angle or some shit. Just like there's no opportunity. And you know what? I think it's time we cancel culture. I think is what we're wrapping up to, right? That's your actual safe room, or we're in the crosshairs of the woke mob, and they've single-handedly took away my opportunity to be in the NFC Championship, and not just because I'm actually the least clutch celebrated quarterback of all time. That can't be right.
No, he needed to study more film with Joe Rogan.
Pat McAfee's gonna eat you alive, dude. You're not even black, Justin, so write that down.
Oh my god, that
it's just like, what the fuck? If you really think about it. I'm not white, I'm more of like a loose peach.
Like it really doesn't even matter what they said. The fact that he was wearing a tuxedo.
The tuxedo is so funny. And Joe Rogan's like, maybe he told him, hey, I'm coming in a tux, or he just decided tux is the move, and Rogan's just in like a long sleeve with just like knit like loose shirt in like a barn like aesthetic like studio. Like it's no sense of like situational awareness at all from the man that's like 12 steps to save your life. Just
that was wild.
Huge, like just worst nerd at prom energy. Just like trying so hard to like show up looking like that, like, and like it makes you better. Not as like not ironic, not like sarcastic. Just like, no, this is actually how. This is when men were men. We used to make things in this country. Wearing a tuxedo to a fucking podcast.
Not even a well-fitting one.
No, and it's just a bad tuxedo. It looks bad.
Yeah. He looks horrible. He looks like he's on drugs or something.
The drug of 100% beef. The drug of winning. And folks, that's our show. See the show notes for a link to view the artifacts for yourself and view the endnotes.
Artwork by jasartstudios. Music produced by Nicholas Pizzuto.
Rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Facebook and tell a friend or enemy about the show. Join us in 3 weeks as we find 2 new texts to discuss.
Neither of those things are true.
One current event, overrated or underrated. Breyer announcing his step down during the Biden presidency. Overrated, underrated, hot take.
I think this is going to be seen as overrated after Biden fails to fill the seat before Trump 2024.
Isn't it? I said I would put $5 down right now that the spot is not going to get filled until Trump steps out of the shadow presidency and gets back into the main one. Once he's the shadowless president, it's going to be... It's just going to be another Enron, like, in-house counsel.
No. Did you see this take of Biden will do the right thing and put in one of RBG's black law clerks?
No! That's so funny.